Hey, everyone. Happy Tuesday afternoon. This is Sick of This Shit Publications. I'm Nick Perro, not your dad, bringing you Intelligent Masculinity, where I'm joined by a special guest, someone I was introduced to by Chris Goldsmith. He's another friend in the community, veteran. I'll let him introduce himself. Stephen Acheson, welcome to the Intelligent Masculinity series. And do you mind, like I said, introducing yourself real quick for the audience?
Sure. Well, first of all, thanks for having me. I've been looking forward to doing this ever since, like you said, Chris introduced us a couple weeks back, and been thinking a lot on this topic, not just since then, but over the course of my life, really. I grew up pretty much like your quintessential Wisconsin rural farm kid. I grew up on my stepdad's 140 cow fifth generation dairy farm, and really involved in 4-H and driving tractors and wrestling and feeding calves and showing calves at the fair and all that stuff you think of when you think of a dairy farm in Wisconsin. That was how I grew up. And then life happens, and I find myself around 13 years old moving in with my biological dad in a town called Neenah, which a lot of people probably heard of. There's a pretty famous song about Neenah. But uh, and then I bounced around a lot through my middle school years, high school years. I moved into a lot of different schools, was the new kid in a lot of different situations, and ended up graduating from uh, a city called Fond du Lac, Wisconsin in 2003.
I've
I
heard
was
of
a
it.
Yeah, I was a junior in high school in my history class when 9/11 happened, and watched
Ooh,
that. Watched as soon as he came in, he turned. We had one of them old TVs in the corner of the classroom, and he got a call on the phone, and he turned the TV on, and right when the TV turned on, the second tower the second plane hit the tower, and we all thought it was a movie, right? We were like, what's this
yeah.
all about? And so, I had a year of high school left after that happened, and I watched this whole generation of kids a year older than me, going right into the military and right into the war machine. And I really, even then, hadn't planned on joining. But life comes at you fast. I was already living on my own by the time I was a senior in high school, and working 3 jobs. And the job I thought was going to take me down a career path that fell through. I had a civil engineering apprenticeship when I was in high school, and that sort of fell through around the time I graduated. And so then I was kind of just like floating, doing these dead end jobs and no money for anything. And I was on my way back from a landscaping job when my phone rang, and it was the Army recruiter calling me. Like, hey, your mom gave us your number, and we were just curious if you ever thought about, like, thanks, mom. Ever thought, if you ever thought about joining. And after a month of taking a piss test, getting my system clean, I I was went into MEPS, and there you go. I scored really high on the ASVAB, and so pretty much any job was available to me. And they went through the list, and they said, "Oh, forward observer," and I was like, "Oh, what is that?" And I was like, "Oh, you're gonna be the tip of the tip." I'm like, "Yeah, that sounds cool." Like,
That's fun.
yeah, let's do that. And so I kind of went into it with really no family history. I think the last person in my family to serve in the military was in the Civil War. And other than that, it was like, my grandpa was too young for World War II. My dad was too young for Vietnam. And, luck of the draw, there I was. So I didn't go into it with any like big desire to serve my country, or to serve in the military, I should say. But once I got in, it was on. Like
Mhm.
I really bought in, to both my job and just being a soldier. And it was day one of basic training when Chris and I met, and we were basically battle buddies ever since,
Oh,
um,
shit.
all the way through. We were one
That's
and
awesome.
two, and I always like to point out I was one and he was two.
Hey, sometimes you got to point that out.
Yeah,
I'll remind him of that
yeah,
when we see him on Friday. Then.
yeah. But I just remember being in AIT, and we would have these, like, we would have to self locate on a map, and we would have to find these grid coordinates. And once you found it, you'd kind of pick your head up, to signify that you were done. And it was always like a fraction of a second I was picking my head up and there was Chris right next to me picking his head up at the same time, and it was just, that's how we were always like in this friendly competition with each other. And that carried on all the way through. We got to the same permanent duty station at Fort Stewart together, at 3ID, and I was assigned because I became the distinguished honor graduate of our platoon, and so I got put into a COLT platoon, or a combat observation lasing team, which was all forward observers. We were all consolidated into one platoon, and we were sort of at a brigade element where he got assigned to an infantry unit and was there, like, eyes on the ground for the infantry unit. But we both deployed in OIF 3, and that was to Sadr City mostly, which was, in 2005, not a lot of fun at all.
No.
Our platoon got repurposed from, we pretty much knew we weren't going to be doing forward observer stuff because it was such a densely populated area. For those that don't know, a forward observer is basically the ones that call for fire, for indirect fire, artillery, close air support, all that kind of stuff. We paint targets with lasers and guide ammunitions in. So we weren't really going to be doing a lot of that, but we were such a specialized platoon that they repurposed us to be our brigade commander's personal security detail. So I was the lead driver for that effort, which took me on over 400 missions in 11 months and 11,000 miles through the worst hit IED routes in the entire country. And somehow we didn't get hit once, but everyone around us was getting hit every day. And, so we're out all the time. We're usually the first ones responding to a lot of nasty scenes, and went to over 60 funerals, man, in 11 months. And it
Jesus,
was,
man.
yeah, it wasn't fun at all. I mean, when you're 19 and you're in it, you think differently.
Yeah.
It's an adventure. You don't really see it for what it is. But I remember having to do our post-deployment health assessment, and my NCOs had all been in the initial invasion, and they were all like, "Oh, just say no on every question, because you don't want to have to go to the shrink. You don't want to have to go to the, just say no." And I remember reading the questions, and I'm like, "But I should be saying yes to every
Yeah.
one of these questions. Like, this is going in my permanent record." So I actually answered them honestly.
Good
It's
for
like,
you.
it's like, did you see death? Did you think you were going to die? All those kind of questions.
Yeah.
And even after answering them honestly, like, the most that came out of it was like, I got sent to our unit medic before we redeployed, and he was like, "Do you want to go home?" I'm like, "Yeah, I want to fucking go home." you know and okay, get on the plane. And it was up to me. I was the only one in my platoon after we got, of course, how it is when you come back, everybody
Yeah.
goes through cheats to the wind, and you lose guys, you pick up new guys. But I was the only one. Like, I stayed not the only one that stayed in my platoon, but the only one out of the guys that stayed that actively sought out mental health treatment, because I was already experiencing PTSD even during the deployment. I mean, I remember waking up in the morning, like, having chewed off all the skin off my knuckles from just
Mm.
like anxious.
Hmm.
Anyway, and that's
Yeah.
really what's.
Don't go into whatever you don't want to go into.
Oh man,
We
I'm
don't need
I'm
to
an open
dredge
book.
up.
I mean,
Yeah.
I'm an open
Okay.
book, dude. I've always been like very one to really want to talk about it, because so many people don't.
Hmm.
And how do we educate the civilian population if we just shut up about it? Like, to me, that's just how we perpetuate it for the next generation. That's just how we create this whole populace that's either apathetic to what we went through, or like doesn't understand it at all, right? And I just never wanted to be that vet who just sat down at, belly up to the bar,
Hmm.
and only had like war stories to talk about. Like, I wanted my life to be more than that. And so I've always been very forthcoming with my experience and tried to educate people, not to be braggadocious about it, but just to, like, this is what happens in war. This is what
Hmm.
happens to the human psyche in war. And that's really what kicked off my journey into the mental health. And I was also injured when I was deployed. We blew a tire on a mission, and they mount the spare tires of on the back of the Humvees, and it popped off its mount and came back on top of me, and it crushed my
Oh
back.
shit.
Yeah, so I've had 3
Those tires are
surgeries.
heavy too.
Oh yeah, they're not light. And when they're falling from above you, and you're trying to catch them, because again, you're 19 and you think you're invincible.
Mm-hmm.
So I just remember like laying on the hot cement of our motor pool with this tire on top of me, like able to feel my legs, but in so much pain that I couldn't really move. And then I stayed over there for 6 more months with that injury. And I remember messaging, because I didn't want to go home. I didn't want
Yeah.
them to know. I was trying to cover it up. And I remember my mom like sending me these natural muscle relaxers in the mail so that they wouldn't show up on piss tests and all this shit. But as soon as I came home, it was clear that like I couldn't be a forward observer anymore. So I had two surgeries while I was on active duty, and that pretty much put the nail in the coffin of my career. But it also gave
Yeah.
me time to step back from the day-to-day craziness of just being in the military and really think about what the hell I just went through. And at the same time, like Chris is playing a very important role in my life at that moment too, because I had a first row seat to what he was going through. We were living together at the time.
Oh
Uh,
shit. So
I'm the I'm I'm
you guys are tight knit,
I'm the
really
guy that
good,
saved his
close
life.
friends.
Like I'm the guy that found him when he tried to commit suicide, and
Thank you
got him to
thank
the
you for
hospital.
saving him. Thank you for
Yeah,
saving him. Just as a person, like Chris is an amazing human being, and the world is better off because he's still here. So
yeah.
just thanks for saving who's become a friend of mine now too. Like he's he's a good dude.
I am so proud of Chris, and I get a little teared up just thinking about it because we've been through so much together, and that was just the beginning of it. That was really just the beginning of our story, intertwined together, and all the battles that we fought since then with the VA side of things, and the discharge character of his discharge upgrade, and then high ground veterans advocacy to change laws, and all. I mean, I've testified in DC with him. We've trained other veterans how to be advocates for their issues. It's been a journey, man. It really has. And it's a 19-year-old kid thinking that these are the things that I would be doing 20 years later. Never. You know what I mean? Never would have thought
Hmm.
that this would have been my journey, but it is. And you just got to take it as it comes. And when battle buddy isn't just like a cliche thing. Like Chris and I are battle buddies. Like there's nothing that I wouldn't do for him. And you know, I know if I called him right now and I told him I needed him, he'd be there for me. So
He's someone you can cry with.
yeah, for sure.
And for one of the things that I've learned through all of this, and I've learned myself, but it was put into words really well by my friend Sherrod Swaney, who's one of the co-founders and directors at Centered America. They're a 501c4 nonprofit group that's centering the discussion on more progressive politics and like human valued and centered decency. I work with them as a contributor as well, and I really like the work that they do. But Sherrod, I interviewed Sherrod. He's 19 years old. He and Gavin are both in college, and they've started this nationwide organization to help shift politics. One of the things we were talking about in all of this was that fuck, god damn it, I lost exactly what I was going to say. Oh no, sorry, got it back. One of the things that we were talking about, Sherrod Swaney and I, was the need for men to be able to have a group of friends that they can cry around.
Yeah.
And you have to have someone you can comfortably cry with, because you need to get those emotions out healthily, and you need to know that someone's going to be there without question when you're at your worst,
Hmm.
because often when you're crying, you're at in a terrible spot. Um, and it sounds like, and it is, you've had that. You've had that with Chris. Um, and so we haven't even gotten into any of the questions yet, which is perfect. We never do. We never get into them right away. So don't even worry. We're right on track for how off track we get.
Yeah.
Um, is I'm just Can you tell me about some of the like times that you two have been together, um, or been with each other to help each other in those moments? If you want to talk about them in terms of like being able to cry to each other, or being able to honestly tell someone that they fucked up and how that works. Or, and on the converse side, honestly being able to tell someone how successful and proud of them you are. So can you talk a little bit about that with your friendship with Chris?
I mean, that might take up the whole rest of the show. I mean, because Chris and I, we really have been through it all. Um, so the first thing that came to mind was after he had gotten out, after he had gotten kicked out with an other than honorable, or general under honorable, I think it was. Anyway, he got booted. Um, he joined Iraq Veterans Against the War and testified at the Winter Soldier in, I think it was around DC. And I was still active duty. I still had time on my contract. I was stop loss. But when he testified in that, I live streamed it for my platoon. And I live streamed him testifying with all them other veterans about the war crimes that they had both done themselves and seen happen around them. And that was like my first proud moment for Chris. Was like, that's what I'm fucking talking about, dude. That's what being a patriot is. That's, you know what I mean? Like that's what taking accountability looks like. And to just show that in a setting where like most of these veterans, when you're on active duty, like you don't even think about that kind of stuff. You aren't ever even exposed to that kind of thought. And here's a guy that I've served with since day one, who's out there doing that work. And he ended up coming on a base tour with Iraq Veterans Against the War and came to Fort Stewart. And I met him there. And that was like my first exposure to the group, was him going from base to base, talking about GI rights and all this other stuff. And back then he had this big mohawk and shit. And you know, just radical. And so I actually started to go to Iraq Veteran Against the War meetings while I was still on active duty in Savannah. There was a group of people there that had started a chapter, and amazing people. So that's one, my first proud Chris moment. And then, you know, the other one about being able to cry. So I went to visit him in New York on Long Island at his home when he was in his worst, like drunk, you know, like all the stories he talks about. Like I was
Yeah,
there,
because he's an
and
open book too.
yeah,
He
yeah,
came on and told me a lot about some of how
yeah.
broke he was.
He really was. And you know, I I got married right after we got home from our deployment to my first wife. And like that, even though the marriage wasn't the greatest, it ended amicably, but it saved me. It saved me in a lot of ways, because I would have been right there with Chris in for all of the drinking and all of the partying and all, you know, but I was married. So like I didn't go on all the excursions, I call them, with him.
Hmm.
We had a few, right? But so I get out of the military and I go to visit him, and I'm out there in Long Island, and he's giving me like the tour of the city. We go in the city. He gives me the whole tour of the city. And while we're in the city, his dad, who was on hospice at the time at home, his dad passed away while we were in the city. And we came home, and his mom and his family are all in the living room, and you know, just asking us about our day like nothing had happened. And then his mom just nonchalantly says, "Oh, by the way, your dad passed away." And
Jesus.
it was just like this fucking ton of bricks hit him, you know. And I could just see it on his face. And I just remember like helping him carry his dad's body out of the house, you know, like right there with him, step by step, carrying him out to the ambulance, or the hearse or whatever was out there waiting, and just having that moment with him, like being thankful that I was there with him in that moment, for him to have a shoulder to cry on. Because it was pretty heavy, you know. It was amongst all the other things that he was dealing with, to then have your, you know, lose your dad. Uh, so that was just another moment. And then, you know, obviously all the things that he's done since then to bring himself up, all the fighting with the VA for his benefits, for his discharge upgrade, um, graduating from college, all the advocacy work. Like I've been there in the background, obviously, like I don't want to say riding his coattails, or whatever, like living off of his wave, but just being in the background supporting him, and at times, you know, um, giving him advice along the way, and just being there to support his efforts, believing in him, uh, letting him know like, dude, I'm there. no matter what you need, I'm there. So
It's good to have a friend
yeah.
that you can really rely on and who cares about you. And that's more important in the long run than like personal aspirations or like ego driven things. And that's one of the things that we've identified too really well through this series is what we consider intelligent masculinity isn't ego driven. It's driven by growth and the self, yes, but it's not egotistical about it. And it's okay, as we say sometimes, is to be not the main character in the story. You don't have to be the main character. You can be the secondary role, and that's okay because somebody else can be a main character, but at some point in your life, you will be a main character. You're the main character in your story, but you can help by being the supporting character for somebody else's story.
Hmm.
And it's really cool to see like how we accept our or go into our different like roles and how we want to act in life and where we want to go, because before the show we were talking a little bit about like your choice to stay home as a dad and be a stay-at-home dad rather than take opportunities that could have been maybe financially beneficial for you and or your family, but you made the decision to be with the kids because it was more important. um, and can you talk a little bit about that, like that decision process and how your kids have influenced you and why you now accept the idea of I'm a stay-at-home dad and that's okay and that's a good thing?
Yeah. I think it really goes back to uh, watching men perform badly throughout my life. Men who have been my father figures, more or less, who have, in my opinion, like in various ways succeeded, but in various ways like failed to step up to the moments,
Mm-hmm.
and been absent when they shouldn't have been. And I just never wanted, whether it be my stepson or my biological son, to ever feel like they were alone and didn't have somebody there to support them and to be there for them along the way. And so I made a conscious like promise to myself that I was going to be a better dad than the men that I've had as father figures in my life. And I remember shortly after I got out of the military, I have a younger brother, half brother, who's like 11 years younger than me. And like, I could get into it more, but we got a kind of family history of really shitty men in our families. And I said to him, like, dude, it's up to us to change this pattern of behavior. Like, we have to be the generation that ends it and sets a better example and sets a new legacy for this family, because, it's just generational trauma if we just let it continue. And so that's all I've really been trying to do, man, is like live up to that promise I made myself a long time ago. And like you said, it took me a while because I've just been a go-getter, uh, professionally, just mover and shaker. And I was on kind of a trajectory, of maybe some ego-driven stuff for a while. But when my partner Steph and I met, she had already had a son who was about 5 years old at the time. And when the opportunity sort of came around for me to be a stay-at-home parent, I took it and I committed myself to both raising him. He's now a freshman in college, and now my son Aldo is he's six and a first grader. And I wouldn't change it for anything. Like you said, I've given up a few opportunities that have come up along the way, that could have put me like in a better position financially than I am. Luckily, I'm at 100% disability with the VA. Um, that has made it a lot easier to do for sure. But it's not like anybody's money bags over here, right? Like
No.
it's just enough to live. Like it's not enough to really get by, or to get ahead, I should say. We have to be very creative. Like my partner's a public school teacher. She teaches high school science and biology and earth science, and so we're not struggling by any means, but we would be if it was just her income. Uh, but having that disability has made it possible for me to be more comfortable as a stay-at-home dad.
I I'm also, you and I are both disabled veterans, both 100% disabled, and it sucks. And I want to say, like, it's not an easy thing being disabled. Um, and having these in the, it's weird to think that we have a privilege because of it. Um, because I feel privileged to have my disability check. I feel it's a privilege to be able to live, like,
Yeah.
at a modicum of, like, I've got nice things behind me because I had them. Like, I don't buy new things. We don't go places. We don't do a lot of stuff because, money's tight. Like, and this is where I make my income off of, and my wife has her own business in the community. And so I get that feeling of, like, is it enough? Am I doing enough? To,
Yeah.
like, you doubt yourself and question when you're doing it, and it's really hard. Um, but, like, you said before, about, like, pre-show, you were talking about, like, you don't really want to, like, almost grandstand it because women have been doing this type of behavior forever, have
Yeah.
given up on dreams or goals and aspirations to stay home with their kids and do other things that are less capitalistic in
Hmm.
nature and less driven towards that end. Can you, sort of shifting into our questions for the day of intelligent masculinity, because we're halfway through our interview and this is about the time I start asking questions. Unless, and if you've got a little extra time, we do tend to go long because I ramble, and you seem to be a rambler too, and that's okay. um, just like most of us, we like to ramble, we like to talk. And so I'll actually start with the second half of this question, because you're in a you're in a slightly different role than a lot of other men are, where your primary responsibility is at home.
Hmm.
um, and we often attribute that to the feminine half of our system. Like, although it's not a half, it's a, in my opinion, it's a big spectrum of, it's all emotions, they're all human. We just decided that they needed to be gendered.
Two
um,
overlapping bell curves is the
yeah,
engineer mind.
yeah, two overlapping bell curves. um, and so on that curve of femininity, though, is who has been one of the most influential, because you've talked so far about at least Chris a little bit, and I'll get back to the masculine side, because I want more on that too, is who has been one of the most influential feminine figures in your life and why?
Yeah, this was a hard question for me because I come from a big Sicilian family dominated by 9 aunts, and I have 4 sisters. And so maybe that's why I ramble, because when I finally get an opportunity to talk, I got to take it.
You got to make it count.
But with that said, hands down, the person who has influenced me the most is my partner, Steph. Um, she has made me analyze my behavior from almost the first day we've been together, and has just really, held me accountable for my actions, from that, feminist perspective, from language that I use to, behaviors that I would now consider pretty toxic, that she saw this she saw who I truly was, and a little rough around the edges, and sort of like helped me get there. And I'm not saying that I'm perfect by any means, but has certainly helped me identify within myself, like, where I can improve, and to be a better partner, to be a better father, to be a better human being. And it's like, I wish I was more like her in so many ways. Uh, she's just so intelligent, and always seems to have the right answer. And I'm just like, how do you do it? How are you always right? How does that happen? How am I always wrong and you're always right? um,
I've asked that question quite a few
yeah,
times.
yeah. But it's true. So she really is my biggest influence when it comes to that feminine side, for sure.
I love that. So building on this for her and around some of the like understanding that I've gotten out of this and all of the intelligent masculinity discussions we've had so far is the refusal to outsource accountability onto others is a huge piece of it. And you talked a little bit, you were talking about how you were rough around the edges and she helped guide you and shape you, but not change you or force you. um, so looking at that, do you see or do you have any experiences from there where you actively remember like hearing something that you didn't want to hear about yourself and then going, I'm kind of wrong here and I should fix this rather than getting angry about it?
Well, yeah, I think it started with her just pointing out some language stuff, derogatory things that I would say. Just the nature of how I grew up, I
Hmm.
suppose. It wasn't like really meant to be derogatory, but it was, whether I meant it that way or not. So really just helping me analyze like how I communicate. Um, I mean, gosh, there's so many examples along the way. Um, right? And I still slip up. I'm not perfect,
Yeah,
like I said, but it's I've got she's helped me become a lot better at recognizing it and accounting for it and um, committing to working on it to be better. Um, so yeah, I mean specific examples. Gosh, I
they're
could go
hard.
on and on, right?
Yeah,
But
yeah.
mostly with language, I would say,
Hmm.
because I've never really had ill intent towards the opposite sex or anybody that identifies as female. But sometimes our language as men, especially coming from the military and conservative farmer background, like you just say things off the cuff that you don't really realize how they're impacting the people around you.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. No, that's a big one. The subtle shifts in language, and it's not. It is policing our language, but it's really just making our language more uh, equitable,
yeah.
where we're not actively putting people down who are not ourselves. Like
Hmm.
I've shifted the way I speak when I insult men specifically. I only use male gender parts.
Yeah, yeah. Why are you being such a testicle?
Yeah, yeah. Why are you being such a dick? Why are you a taint? Like you're just a gross ball sack, man. Like things like that. People like one men know that those are weak parts of our body, and like and most people find them ugly. So like comparing you to that is, I think, more effective. Um, because as we found out, or as somebody once quoted to me, and now I use quite often, is a pussy can take a pounding, but testicles can't. And so I'd rather be like a pussy than a testicle. Um, and so that's how I learned to shift my language on that, because I was like, we are derogatory and it's stupid. And I'm not going to put down women for things that they aren't involved in.
Yeah, I think I've heard you say that on a previous episode, and I've been saying that for years, man. I mean, really, I have, and it just made a lot of sense to me. From the anatomical perspective, it's like, yeah, you can take a guy down with just a little flick, but you know,
Women
so
ain't going down. Like,
yeah, yeah, and so let's just like let's have our language match our intent is really what it
yeah.
is. Um, so
I think that's a great way to boil it down to is have our language match our intent. And I think if anyone takes anything away from this is make sure you're intentful with what you say, because words have meanings and words used in the right way are really powerful, and words purposely used in the wrong way are equally powerful and
yeah.
can be really destructive.
Yeah, definitely. I've done a quite a bit of coaching over the years with my stepson. He's really involved in sports, and not that I have loved every sport that he's in, but because in a small town, there's not always someone there to step up to coach. So it's like, yeah, I can get on YouTube and look up some plays, or
Yeah.
whatever. So like I've coached him in flag football from the time he was 5 until he aged out, and it never failed. Like every single year, the best player in our league was always a girl, always a girl. And so the first day of practice, I would line up our team and I would, set out some rules and I'd say, all right, I never want to hear any of you say, oh, you throw like or kick like or run like a girl, because guess what? Girls have been making y'all look foolish out here on this field every single weekend. And it's true, man. And so it's funny because one year I said that, and we always would have practice at the same time as other teams. And as
Hmm.
I'm laying these rules out for my team, the coach next to me is literally screaming at his team, "You throw like a bunch of girls." And it was just like, oh man, like,
Oh
you
God.
know, and that's not the
What?
worst thing in the world necessarily,
Yeah.
but it's just like just making them start to think about the language they're using.
It's the repetition of it too, is at a young age, as you get instilled with those ideas and thoughts without really thinking about it.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're only taught to use the phrase, you throw like a girl, to be insulting, instead of you just throw bad, or even you throw like a boy. Because,
Yeah,
but like some of the boys out there, you guys need to learn how to throw forwards and not backwards when you throw.
yeah,
Like it is really funny how like the intent is really important, but it's good to see like when you step up and do those things, you make an impact on those kids. Like I stepped up to be a soccer coach, and I was very intentful with how I spoke to my kids, because you could hear it on other coaches when things go wrong.
mm-hmm.
Whereas our team, even when things went wrong, like we celebrated and we picked each other up because the kids were there to have fun. And that's what we should be doing. We should be promoting the sport and the fun and the joy and the teamwork out of it, and not beating each other down for no reason. Yeah.
Definitely
And as Robin says in the chat, gender talk should just be outdated. It should. Like,
agreed.
emotions are human things, responses are human things. We don't need to ascribe them to a gender. Um, However, we are going to ascribe them to a gendered type for just the moment, is as we move into the next half of the question, which is normally the first half of the question, but we're doing it the second half, is who has been one of the most influential masculine figures in your life and why? And I do want to point out too, I should have said this before the feminine one, is masculine and feminine do not equate to male or female when I ask these questions. And that's why I changed them. I intentfully changed them from who is the most important male figure or female figure to masculine and feminine, because they can take all shapes and all sizes. So from that, using that in your thought as you're going through.
I completely agree, because I think I've learned more about masculinity from women than I have from the men in my life. And I'm sure some of my family are going to watch this at some point, and I am definitely not trying to like um, beat up my father particularly, because he was very young when he had a lot of kids and worked very hard his whole life to provide a standard of living for us, and it forced him to just not be present as much as I wanted to be for my kids. And so, but I will say that I've learned more about masculinity probably from my mom than from anyone else. And not explicitly, but just by watching her date a bunch of fucking dudes that she needed to fix, you know what I mean? And never could. And watching her go through physical and mental abuse, and addicts, and she's actually in the middle of her third divorce right now, and it's just like rinse and repeat. And that's not to say, like, I'm not, again, like, saying anything bad about my mom. I love my mom to death, but and she'll be the first one to tell you, like, she said it my whole life, like, oh, I really know how to pick them. you
Mm-hmm.
know, and
Yep.
it's true. Sorry, mom, but it's true. You really fucking do. Um, so it's just like, just being, just looking back and always saying, like, man, I hope that I never treat my partner like I've seen my mom get treated. Like, I've been witness to my mom being held to a shotgun twice in my life. You know what I mean? So, like,
Yeah.
very toxic masculinity traits. Um, and married to a man who was sexually abusive to one of my sisters. So it's like it runs the gamut of poor male influences in my life who were supposed to be father figures to me, and the best one being my biological dad, for sure. But still, in my opinion, like, failed in a lot of ways to live up to my expectations of what a dad should be.
Hmm.
Um, you know, I'll just kind of leave it at that because again, I'm not trying to like paint my dad in this terrible light, but he was the best of a pile of shitbags.
Well, as our friend Zooples in the chat says, is that's a beautiful takeaway from such horrors, and I agree. Is you were able to take away what you should be doing and how you should be treating, rather than this is the model that I'm going to continue to follow. You
Yeah,
took you made the right choice, in my opinion, but also a harder choice of how do I deconstruct these toxic behaviors and not allow them to continue. And so I I applaud you for finding the good too, in, like you said, in a pile of shit. And I don't mean to downplay anybody, or I'm if you watch later, sorry, not insulting anybody in your family, Stephen, um, and or for Stephen's family, not trying to insult you. And it's okay when we fail. Like, it's okay to learn from our failures, and that's actually what we need to be doing. And Stephen, that seemed like a life lesson that you picked up by watching what failures could be and recognizing how to grow from them. And
that's
so,
definitely not easy to watch the your mom who you love more than anything just continue to be treated in such a way and
yeah,
you know not necessarily making the same mistakes but similar mistakes her whole life and finally now at in her early mid 60s like realizing that she's probably just better off being alone uh and making steps to improve her life has been great for me to see um even if it's 40 years 40 years too late but
steps forward are still good for her.
yeah.
And I hope she does find the peace that she needs, so that she can enjoy the rest of her life happily,
Yeah.
um, and not be abused. Because no one should be abused in a relationship. Like, my partner's my best friend. And I say that in like all all sincerity. Like, she is the person that I want to hang out with the most. Like, she's my best friend. She cares about me. She values me. She encourages me, and I want to make sure that I live up to the example and better the example from what my dad set for me. And being able to like see that in other men is really important, is and really valuable for all of us, especially those of us who are dads, is to see other dads growing from either good or bad examples, and then being proud to say it, like acknowledging that there was hurt or harm done, and this is how I've bettered myself because of it. And the more we have that, I think the more people will be able to see it. And just young people need to see that it's okay to see failure, but it's also you have to encourage the growth. And we can do it for our parents, we can do it for ourselves, we can do it for our kids, but we have to encourage that growth with each other. And so my next question for you is, as someone who has gone through various stages of growth and various either positive um, events in your life or traumatic events in your life, you've been able to, without maybe knowing the name for it, because I made it up not too long ago, was the intelligent masculinity of it. Is, given that phrase, what would intelligent masculinity mean to you, boiling it down from your experiences?
Yeah. I like I said, I've seen a few of your episodes, so
Yeah.
I've seen other people's responses to this, and I'm sure some of these will be have been repeated, but I have some notes here in front of me that I came up with, and the biggest one um, for me is probably just like critical thinking, um, just really being intentional about how your actions are affecting other people too, and And I think the hardest one for me with intelligent masculinity has been emotional regulation.
Mhm.
It's something that I still struggle with. That fight or flight with me is like 90% fight. And just really, and Steph has been very helpful with me, patient with me when it comes to that, um, balancing, getting more of a balance in my life, especially since my son was born. It's like the last thing I want to do is pass on my PTSD to my son, right? That generational trauma. And so just really, and I'm not perfect. I guess that like there are moments where I cringe, like, oh man, I hope he
Mhm.
doesn't remember that. I hope he has childhood amnesia with that moment. uh, right. But and I learned a lot from him, um, as far as what it means, even at 6, how intelligent he is and the things he picks up on. Um, and really having empathy, I think, is a big part of it. Being able to just see things from other people's perspectives, even if you haven't necessarily lived that perspective.
Mhm.
I think a lot of guys fail at that. They have it their way, they see it their way, and that's it. It's black and white, and it's like, no, everything is gray. All
Yeah,
shades of gray. And just keeping an open mind. Um, Always trying to just better yourself, keeping an open mind on things. Like obviously there are things that I'm pretty rigid on that, through experience or what have you, but I always try to keep a pretty open mind with people and try to learn as much as I can from everybody that I meet. And being a leader is important too. I feel like I'm in a position in my life now. I just turned 40. Well, actually, I'm almost 41 now. Holy crap! Uh, um, where I'm ready to sort of like step up into more
Mhm.
leadership. I don't feel like I've always been a leader, from the military on to business things I've done to coaching, like I said, but just putting a lot of thought into what that leadership looks like, and making sure that I'm not like reinforcing some of those bad traits, those toxic traits that we see so often with leaders. Um, so yeah,
I like it.
that's me.
So you sort of answered a bunch of, or part of the question, at least for the next one too, is how do you intentionally model that masculinity in your life? What do you do to make sure that you are actively practicing what you have promised to yourself, or what you set a goal for yourself to be like?
Yeah. So when I saw this question or heard this question in one of your previous episodes, I was just like racking my brain. Like I don't know. I'm good at talking about myself, obviously, but I did what I do a lot, and I reached out to my oldest sister, who's pretty much my confidant, who knows me at the core of who I am and who I want to be. And I asked her, like, hey, I'm going on this podcast. It's about intelligent masculinity, and like, how would you say I exhibit these traits? And she's like, I don't really know what you mean. So I shared her the Chris episode, and she's like, all right, I'll watch it. And she watched it, and I got this message back like, oh, I get it now. I got a whole bunch of ideas. And so she sent me this like big long list
Oh
of like,
man, I love that.
so I'm like, hey, you know what? When he asks me this, I'm just gonna read from this fucking list that she sent me because it's perfect. It's like
I
absolutely
love
perfect.
this.
And so the very first thing, which I'm so glad she put first, was showing strength by not being physical or bullying, but trying to teach others that being masculine doesn't have to be defined by social norms. By hiding behind emotions like throwing your weight around because you're a male, or always being right because you're the man of the house. And I was just like, God, you know me, sis. You really understand what I'm trying to do with my life and who I'm trying to be. Uh, um, the next one she wrote was exhibiting fairness in discussions, but also offering alternatives and other perspectives. So, again, like I haven't walked in everybody's shoes, and no one has really walked in my shoes. Like being a combat deployed veteran, well, that alone is a fraction of a percentage of the population, right? And so I have that unique perspective. And being an anti-war combat deployed veteran, well, now we're even talking about a smaller fraction of a percentage. So, um, I thought she nailed that one right on the head too.
Yeah.
Um,
You're getting some, you got by the way, an amazing compliment from this is Stephen glows when he speaks. It's so warming and endearing. Just so you know, you really do. You light up when you're speaking, and it's really fun to see.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Um, I I mean I want to keep going down this list because some of them
Keep
are just
going,
like
man. This is all about you, brother.
um, being an equal towards your partner versus being a dominant and not feeling insecure in your role in your partnership. And being a farm kid, working all the time, working 3 jobs in high school, being in the military, earning an engineering degree, starting my own farm, and then boom, all of a sudden my service connected injuries put me in this unemployable status where I'm getting 100%, where I don't have to work 100 hours a week to make a living anymore. And I don't want to say the word just, but now I'm just a stay at home dad. At first, that was a total mind fuck for me. I just had no value. And I know that's all like, oh, this capitalist system based thinking, but like I I was very proud of, and that's one trait I get from my biological dad is like he's a hard worker. All the pride he has is on how hard he worked his whole life to build the life he has. And I put a lot of emphasis on that too. Even if it became like a negative trait at times, overworking myself. But to go from that lifestyle to like second fiddle, right? And the backup role in a way, even though like I'm raising 2 kids and all those things. It took me a while really to feel equal again in that partnership. And I'm glad that my sister picked up on that feeling like I'm okay being in this role. And I'm very proud of the role that I'm in at this point. And I see how much it benefited both my stepson, who's now out of the house and doing great, and how much being at home has benefited my biological son. And so I take a lot of pride in it. Um, so I'm just really glad that she noticed that. The next one kind of cracked me up because we talked about language earlier,
Hmm.
and it was like avoid being a sheep, having the balls to think rather than just going along with the majority, stepping away from the boys club mindset, and frankly trying to eliminate it. And it's like, yeah, that's definitely something I've made a conscious effort of doing. I refer to it as the good old boys club. You know, I mean, I live out in rural Wisconsin. If I turned my camera around, you would see nothing but woods and prairie and a river, and you know, and the good old boy club is very strong and alive where I live, and I have
Oh yeah.
butted up against it more than once. Um, and I feel like I do that for not just like my own sake, but for the people who don't have the privilege or the ability or the means or who have already been beaten down by it, to be that male voice in the crowd who's like, no, man, fuck you. Like, I'm not going to let you get away with saying that just because it's a woman or, somebody that you think is less than. And having that sort of like veteran tag to using that in a way to like throw it back in their face, like,
Hmm.
what are you going to say to me that hasn't already been said to me by some mean drill sergeant or an Iraqi, or whatever?
Yeah. Yeah. And before you go on, I want to like key in on that for a second.
Yeah.
If you're a veteran and you're a progressive or just pro democracy, lean into it right now. As much as we hate doing it, because I know I do. I don't go out. I mean, I'll talk about the fact that I'm a veteran. Hi, everybody knows I'm a veteran here because I'm on my podcast. But I'm not like that's not my primary like who I am or what makes me who I am. But say on the right wing or on the more regressive side that we're dealing with right now, they make that a primary piece of their personality
Hmm.
and then they expose it. And so everybody associates veterans with that.
Hmm.
Whereas we're out here now reclaiming veteranhood and veteran status in different ways. And it sounds like you're doing that too, even using it on purpose and talking about intent, like we did earlier in our languages, that we can define what being a veteran actually means. And by being proud of it and loud about it, we put our stories out there, and it's more filling the void than doing anything else, so that they see us. So
Yeah.
I just wanted to touch on that real quick.
Yeah. One of the things that I did for a few years when I first got out of the military was I would go to high schools and I wouldn't call them explicitly counter recruiting presentations, but that's effectively what they became. And really trying to give a different version of what being a veteran meant, than what, I was exposed to growing up and what most kids get growing up. And I would intentionally go into some of the higher recruited schools because of their socioeconomic status or whatever. And one of the first things that I would do is I would draw the entire war debt number on the board, all the zeros, all the fucking zeros of the debt that we've incurred, and I would ask them, like, who do you think is paying for that?
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, our moms, our dads. No, your great fucking grandkids are gonna pay for that, you know and it's just like eye opening to a lot of them. They got a lot of positive feedback. They gave me extra time. I would go back to schools. They're like, can you talk for longer next time? So I kind of stopped doing that just for my own sort of like mental health, but um, I
You may
enjoy that.
unfortunately have to pick that one back up as we're going into Iran and we're about to see what $1 trillion budget for the military does.
Yeah, yeah, it's wild, dude. I mean, yeah, that could be a whole other show if you want. um,
I'm open to it, man. Like,
yeah,
this has been so much fun already. This whole conversation. But also like that's my whole thing is I talk masculinity issues and just culture issues and just what it means to be human and talk about these things in a way that people can consume and understand and why they're important. And you're I can't wait to talk to you more. Dude, we're gonna have some good conversations. I'm
yeah,
excited to have you on for some other stuff too and talk to you more. This is a lot of fun. Thanks for
yeah.
coming
I'm
on with
I'm
me
I'm
too.
having a blast, man. It was just like preparing for this. This is the first time that I've really been on a podcast ever. Like I've done my own stuff, really kind of in a
Yeah.
vacuum. I've done it for my own reasons and haven't really like sought out a public, I don't know, a public face, if you will. Like I've done things in the public before, don't get me wrong, but this was like the first time I'm like, damn, I'm gonna be live. Like people are gonna be tuning in and like no filter, no editing, just like live. I hope I don't say anything stupid.
Hey, you're not the first one to say I hope I don't say anything stupid. But what I found is none of us really are. None of us do. We've got even the things we think might sound stupid, like we're getting something out of them. Like it's so much fun.
Yeah.
Um, so also keep going on that list. I
All right.
love
All
this.
right. There's a couple more
I'm
bangers
so
on here.
glad that you prepared like this, and it's so cool that your sister gave you these examples too.
Yeah.
Like it's so fun to hear this. This is really neat
Yeah. It
and
was a lot of fun
shows
for me
how
to read this.
different each of these interviews are too. Like no one's prepared this way. Everybody's had a different like reaction and response to the questions, and I can't wait to hear your answers for the "I'll make a man out of you" Mulan
Oh
section
yeah.
one. Those are going to be fun too. All right,
Well,
let's keep going.
I think it really harkens back to, even though I thought the degree itself was like kind of a joke, going through the entire engineering degree process, like
Hmm.
all it really helped me do was problem solve. Like think about how to problem solve, and part of that is just like being prepared, um, before you go into something as much as you can. And so, it's like that right side versus left side of my brain are always like fighting with each other on how to do things. And I don't know, just like taking notes and reaching out to people who really know me. It just seemed like the right way to go about it. And not wanting to sound unprepared or like I didn't know what I was talking about. Uh, I suppose is part of it too. But yeah, the next one, which really hit home that she pointed out was recognizing patterns in our own family and being the generation to change those patterns, whether it be racism or hiding emotions, sweeping shit under the rug, patriarchal behaviors, and gender defining roles. So, like, yeah, that's me in a nutshell. Like, I don't want to make the same mistakes. I want to end that generational trauma and show that my last name can mean something different than what it has.
I love that.
This one cracked me up. She goes, not disowning others for having different viewpoints, thoughts, goals, or religious affiliations, in parentheses, for the most part.
I was going to say, there's probably, for the most parts, coming up there because
Yeah, yeah,
someone had to be cut out.
yeah. I mean, I've been since 14. I've been a non-believer, let's call it that. But really, as I've gotten older, I'm much more of an anti-theist, I think, than I am an atheist. If I had to, define it, and I've just really, I don't know. I just see how much religion has impacted the world in negative ways, and I take a very like Hitchens Dawkins approach to it,
Mm-hmm.
and I often wonder what Hitchens would have to say about things that are going on in the world right now, even though like he has his own problematic things about him. But George Carlin too, is like another person who I would love to hear from right now. Um, but I do also firmly believe in the tenets of like religious freedom and all of those things. Like I'm not going to stop anybody from practicing what they believe in as long as you're not hurting somebody else. And that's kind of where I draw the line. As soon as you try to bring that shit into my public school, we're going to have a problem.
Yes. Yeah. I live in Arkansas, so like they've
I'm
already brought
sorry.
it into the public schools. So um,
Yeah.
that's that's a unique one. Yeah, we could have some talk on that.
Yeah.
I'm I'm agnostic at best. I'm anti-organized religion.
Yeah.
Like I think the institutions of religion are the problem, not the religions themselves.
That would be a better way I would describe it. Yeah.
Because those institutions are corrupt as shit. Like,
Hmm.
sorry, sorry, corrupt. Sorry, not sorry. Anyway, before we go down that rabbit hole, was that the last one on the list, or do you have
Uh,
some more?
no, no, that's not it.
Good.
So I'm gonna skip a couple because I think we've already covered them. But um, having respect for the opposite sex and their struggles, like feminine-related health issues, abuse caused by males, traumatic experience caused by loss, and commending them for their strength, which a lot of times goes unacknowledged by men and overlooked by society in general. Um, and I think that's really just a factor of, like I mentioned earlier, having 9 Sicilian aunts and 4 Sicilian sisters in my life. I was always constantly exposed to the plight of women my whole life. Whereas, men that maybe aren't are surrounded by women like that don't get that same experience. And again, a lot of it I think is because of my partner Steph, and
Hmm.
she's had battles with endometriosis, and that really allowed me to educate myself on how terrible that condition is for women, and just all of the things they go through that men just don't have a fucking clue about, or don't even care to have a clue about. Like, oh, I'm these men that get grossed out by a period. It's like I grew up on a fucking dairy farm where I was like delivering calves, and these two hands right here delivered my own son. Like I was down in there,
Hmm.
and caught him coming out, and that was the plan the whole time. And our OB didn't necessarily appreciate all my dairy farmer jokes that I would bring to her appointments, but you know, such is
No,
life.
I could see that. I could see the OB being a little sus.
But when it came time, when it was time for go time, like I was, let's go. She just stood back behind me, and I was right there and pulled my son out and started bawling the second I got eyes on him, and laid him on top of her, and he army crawled his way up to start breastfeeding. It was awesome to see that whole thing. I mean, I was actually my mom, and this goes back to my mom giving me the choice to be in the room when one of my younger siblings was born, and watching that whole process. Even though I had been on the farm and delivered calves and all that stuff, like watching my mom give birth to my sister was just like life changing. I can see it every second of it in my mind right now. And so just just always being in tune with what women are dealing with as much as I can be, I think has really helped me in that intelligent masculinity uh, arena, if you will.
That's awesome. Like, I am really glad I got to be in the room with my wife when she gave birth to our son. And I got to experience and see him and her and them together. And I wasn't the one who caught my son. I let the nurse and the doctor do that. My wife was my wife and I had a really good birthing experience for her. I was pretty much just, hey, I want food, I want ice, and I
Mhm.
would go get her food and ice. And she, the one thing I made sure to do, and I'm glad I did, and it just from an experience, something happened. Oh no, I think we should be okay. Um, is from an experience side is like I got to see and take pictures of my wife holding our son for the first time
Yeah.
and like have that forever in our memory bank and be able to look back because if I hadn't been there, if I had been one of those dads who just was like, I'm not going to be in the room with her when she's doing that, that's weird, that's gross, like nobody would have captured a picture of her holding our son for the first time
Hmm.
and seeing him minutes old just loving on his mom and connecting. And i'm I'm glad you got to experience a really unique like be part of that and have that gift, um and get to joke around with the nurse,
Oh yeah,
and
it was
the
great, man.
teams.
We had an amazing doula through the process. Like we went to a hospital, but
Yeah,
our doula had her up dancing the whole time until literally it was like, oh, I just felt him drops, like time to go. You know, like I barely got scrubbed in, and he was coming. You know, and
yeah,
I talk all this big game, but I didn't really do shit. She did all the work. You know,
yeah,
but it's an experience that like how many men even want to do that for
yeah,
their own hangups, like for their own bullshit. Not it, it was such an amazing experience, like for me to do that. I wouldn't have trade I wouldn't trade it for anything. And I encourage every guy that I come across who's like, "Oh, we're expecting." I'm like, "Are you going to deliver your kid?" What? Like, yeah, get the fuck down in there and do that shit. Like, it's awesome. You're gonna have somebody right behind you who's like knows what they're doing. If something goes wrong, like, what are you afraid of? And it's just, I don't know. I just feel like it was it's something that every guy should do, should be a part of. If
yeah,
the wife wants, if the or you know, if the partner wants them to be. There's some women that they don't want their husband down there.
yeah,
Or their
no,
partner or the father or whoever, you know, like but we did. And you know,
yeah,
obviously we talked about it. It wasn't like something I just forced. It was a discussion we had and I was like, I'd really love to be the one that is the first hands on my son. I was down there massaging perineum and you know, like getting it. It was great, dude. It was fucking awesome. I wouldn't trade it for anything.
that's amazing, man.
Yeah.
That's amazing. I really love that, like really love that. And I even just being in the room, like the minimum you should be doing as a partner is being in the room and being there with your partner when they're giving birth to your child. Like
Yeah.
if as long as like I would expect nothing else. Like that's the least you could do, as a loving partner, especially if you care about them and it's your kid. Like
Yeah.
that's part of you that is now coming into the world, and you get you get to experience it for the rest of your life. Why not be there from like moment one?
Hmm.
Um, like
For sure.
I've been there from moment one of my son. I can say that because I saw him be birthed and then I was there and you got to hold your son as the first human being to touch him outside of the womb.
Yeah.
And that's fucking amazing, man. Like I'm so I feel joy just for you, just because you like just because of that. So
Yeah.
thank you.
It was
Um,
great.
good.
The list isn't done.
That's okay. We can keep going if you want on the list.
um, just there's a couple real quick ones. Just bringing awareness to broken systems and unfairness. while presenting logical solutions, which is her last bullet point. And then my wife added in willing to listen and learn and setting an example for your sons. And then the last thing my sister said was, I'm proud to be your sister and I love you. And, that was just like, how can you top
Gosh, I
that?
love that.
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah, I'm so glad your sister helped you make that list and sent you that list of things and that you came prepared with it, because that was that was really fun.
Yeah.
Um, and a really cool way to get to hear about yourself without having you to be maybe the one who writes about it, because it is hard to write about or talk about ourselves sometimes in some ways, and getting somebody like outside validation to match what you see from yourself is really amazing. um,
Hmm.
and we've got a friend saying, damn it, now I'm sobbing. And
That
good,
makes two of us.
good. That makes all of us. You should be. This has been so much fun so far. We've got a couple more questions.
Yeah, let's do it.
How do you, or sorry, I get, we've talked a lot about, in many ways, we've talked a lot about this question too, is self reflection and evaluation. Um, because it's a lot of just the active mindset of wanting to grow and learn. How do you purposely self evaluate or self reflect? And if you do you have a tool that you recommend others to be able to self reflect on?
This might have been the hardest one for me to answer of these questions, because I don't know if I ever really do this intentionally. Um, it just sort of happens naturally because as you might see behind me, and I'm not like a big trophy hunter guy, but I do hunt. I bow hunt. I gun hunt too for meat. I fill my freezer every year with venison that I butcher myself. And but that time in the woods, I feel like is my church. Um, that time that I get to myself in a tree stand where I'm really getting in touch with that like instinctual like hunter predator that's in all of us, I believe, in some way or another, in a healthy way, like not in a you know toxic way, but
Mm-hmm.
um that time that I spend in the woods surrounded by nature is really where I get into like my deepest innermost thoughts about who I am and who I want to be. And I don't know, it's just something about it, something about where your mind goes. Um, when you're just trying to be as still as you can be, and you're trying to be as quiet as you can be, and the time just sort of stands still while you're out there, and at the same time your heart's pounding and you're sweating and you're like your mind just goes to places that it doesn't normally go to. And that's when I do my best thinking and my best reflecting on who I am and the mistakes I've made in my life. And so that's what I would say is find 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 the situations that you can put yourself in that get you in that kind of mindset, um, where you're tapping into something primal, I suppose.
Something deeply human, like
Yeah.
instinctual for us, where we don't always have to think about it, and it
Hmm.
lets our brain go on autopilot.
Yeah.
And sort of leads into the final set of questions, our Mulan segment, which is where we shift to the slightly more whimsical. So here we are, everyone, an hour and 15 minutes into our roughly intelligent masculinity discussion here with Stephen Acheson. Again, I'm Nick Perro, not your dad, and we are at the I'll Make a Man Out of You or the Be a Man segment. It's the Clarion. So I just turned 36. I was in high school when Mulan became like this huge deal in terms of like I was in the choir in school, and I was in the theater, and I was an artistic kid. I have a degree in music theory and composition. That's what I went to school for originally. So I was in that segment of our school, and we used to sing "I'll Make a Man Out of You" pretty much every day. And we sang it in our men's choir. We sang it in the select choir. We actually one of my friends came on as the guest vocal for the female line of during the men's choir rendition. So we had a female in our men's choir doing it, so that we got the ranges correct. That was super fun. And so the song has stuck with me for a long time. And it's our Let's Go Girls for men. It's the clarion call for action, and it gets you pumped up a little bit. And so I got 4 questions from the chorus lines for you, which are: what does it mean to you to be as swift as a coursing river?
Yeah, I like these questions a lot. These questions all really made me think uh, outside of the box a little bit. And I live right off a river. It's called the Pecatonica River, which literally translates to like meandering river. It's just a really slow moving oxbow of rivers most of the time. But then there are times where we get a glut of rain upstream and it becomes a raging torrent and flooding, and it happens real quick. And oftentimes when I'm sitting there on the side of the river, because I do a lot of fishing too, when I'm sitting there on the river, I think about how, the form of the river is pretty constant. The banks of the river are pretty constant. They do change, but for the most part, the river flows where it flows. But the water in the river is always changing. And I think that's a good way to describe who I am is like my form stays the same. Like I don't haven't really changed like the presentation a lot, but who I am is constantly changing, and sometimes I spill out of my banks, and I become this raging torrent of water that can be uncontrollable and erode away things that I've built up over a long period of time. But I just always think about how every molecule of water that passes by is never the same. You go there tomorrow and it's different water than it was the day before, and that's just where my mind went when I read this question. It was just like that's what it means. Is I'm constantly changing, trying to change who, you know, for the better.
I love it. Great analogy and great way to think about it. Our next question: how do you embody the force of a great typhoon?
I think when I think of a typhoon, it's this like large, massive event that can destroy everything in its path. Um, but in order to do that, like a lot of things got to come together in the right way. And the way that I embody the force of a great typhoon is I feel like I do a good job of bringing people together and identifying their strengths and weaknesses and putting them in and myself in positions where they can be successful so that all those ingredients can come together to create this unstoppable force, or at least an effective force. Um, Whether it was with farming, and managing my employees to have a successful farm, or with some of the advocacy work that I've done, bringing veterans together from around the state, uh, or just internally as a family, and just like putting the pieces together to create this typhoon that can't really be stopped. And it also made me think about how I have this passion for weather, and I'm a total weather nerd. And like the first thing that I did when I turned 16 was I grabbed my mom's video cassette recorder and chased tornadoes. And I did that in college too for a while. We used to chase storms out in the Great Plains area, and it was sort of a side passion of mine. So philosophical, but then also like reality is I just really love weather and kind of a nerd in that way.
I love that. My daughter's a weather nerd too, so I she wants to be a meteorologist, and like I think that's awesome. Weather nerds are awesome. Keep being weather nerds,
Oh yeah.
everyone. If you're a weather nerd, keep being a weather nerd. We need more of you.
Hmm.
Next question, and I'll clarify this one. And I know you've probably heard the clarification on this one, but for clarifying for everyone, as we go, this question is: how are you as strong as a raging fire? And when I mean raging, I still mean not a wildfire, but something that's raging and burning hot and still contained.
Uh, So there is a video that exists of me when I was probably 10 years old, on our farm, with in my living room with all of the lights off, and a black mag light like this big as a spotlight, where I was Garth Brooks giving a concert that was recorded by my sisters.
Oh, I
And
love that.
and one of my favorite Garth Brooks songs is Standing Outside the Fire. Okay. And I remember the music video for this song was basically a kid with Down syndrome who was like running a race in the Special Olympics, and he fell down, and it was like the video was like him getting back up and finishing the race. But there's a lyric in there that goes, "Life is not tried; it is merely survived if you're standing outside the fire." And I really thought about that lyric, and how that's sort of the way I feel about life. Is like I always want to be in that fire. I don't think I'm living my life properly unless there's a certain amount of chaos going on, and not that I'm directing that chaos, but that I'm participating in good chaos, good trouble. uh
Yeah.
and so that's sort of where my mind went, and thinking also about how, like, I'm into conservation. My son's name is Aldo, after Aldo Leopold, who's a very famous conservationist from Wisconsin. And I have this prairie right out in front of me, and every couple of years they burn that prairie, and that fire gets rip roaring, and it's a controlled burn. It's not out of control, it's not a wildfire, but it burns pretty hot. But after that fire's done burning, there comes renewal and growth, and the nutrients get returned to the earth, and they nurture the next generation, and bring about the change that you want to see. So it's like sometimes you gotta be that fire, you gotta be in that fire in order to get to that next level or that next chapter, whatever, however you want to say it. So I don't know, that's just where
I
my
love it.
mind.
I love it. And finally, our last question: how are you as mysterious as the dark side of the moon?
So I'm not an astronaut. I always make that caveat, but I do love astronomy. Okay. And I say I'm not an astronaut because I think we should take care of our planet before we try to go populate other planets. But I love astronomy, and I try to teach my son a lot about astronomy as well. And we'll be outside identifying the stars above our house, and just using that cool app to look at different features.
Oh,
Um
we use that too, where you get to
yeah,
see which stars are there, and like you
yeah.
can look down through the earth and it'll tell you where things are. Yeah.
Yeah,
Love it.
absolutely. Um, but how am I mysterious like the dark side of the moon? Well, I've had an incredible amount of people in the past 5 years or so who follow me on social media that'll message me and say, "Man, you need to write a book. Like, you've lived this life, which I'm sure you can relate. Like from the outside looking in, might seem like an incredible, you've had some incredible experiences, but from the inside looking out, I'm like, I haven't even gotten started yet. I haven't, that book is only half written." And so how am I mysterious? Like, it's just I don't know what's next, but I'm really fucking looking forward to it. You know, and I'm not gonna write my book yet because I'm only halfway through it. So how am I mysterious? It's just like I want to keep pushing forward and take on new things, and never stop moving until I'm in the grave. You know.
Love it. That's fantastic. Um, and then, actually, I should always say this. That was not the final question, but the final question, because we've come to almost an hour and a half in this incredible discussion, is how can people find and support your work? I don't have a picture of you for your icon. Um,
Okay.
but I can, next time we talk, if you send me a picture, I'll make sure we get one for your QR code. But there's QR code for your Substack right here for anyone who wants to follow you there. But how can people find and support your work? Shamelessly promote what you do.
Yeah, well, I haven't been terribly active on, a lot of platforms. I've been really low key since I became the stay-at-home dad, and mostly I just post my thoughts on Facebook, on my Facebook profile. And I love to interact with people on there. I am on Substack, but mostly I just share and restack from other creators like yourself and Chris and a few others. But I'm kind of new on there too. I'm not on TikTok. I'm not on Instagram. I think I maybe created an Instagram profile many years ago, but I just, I'm kind of old school, I guess, in that way, where it's mostly just Facebook. I like interacting with people in sort of that way, but I do plan on getting more active on Substack here once I gather my thoughts on like how I want to go about that a little bit more. So really, it's mostly Facebook. So that's where you can find me.
Awesome. Well, can send me a link to after I know some of our folks are on Facebook, if you want, so that they can follow you and subscribe to your work there. I'll include it in our post show notes. If you send me a link to that, and again, follow them on Substack too. If you're with us, if you're in the audience, hit the subscribe button in the top left corner of your screen and Substack so that you can subscribe. If you're with us on one of the other platforms, scan the QR code. This has been a really amazing discussion, and I've really enjoyed getting to meet you, like, and actually really sit down to talk to you about all this, Stephen. I learned a lot. I had a great time, and I think our audience had an incredible time meeting you today. And for anyone in the audience, you will be seeing Stephen again. I am going to be trying to bring him back for some other stuff on Sick of This Shit publications, but you should also start seeing him on the Anti-Fascist Book Club on Banner and Backbone on Fridays, where he's helping us currently read To Catch Fascist. And we're going to continue our discussion in on that on Friday on Banner and Backbone's Anti-Fascist Book Club. This has been the Intelligent Masculinity series. I'm Nick Perro, joined by El Duderino over here, Stephen Acheson. I saw you over there. Have that in there. I'm Nick Perro, not your dad, joined by Stephen Acheson, El Duderino, and this has been Intelligent Masculinity on Sick of This Shit publications. We'll see y'all on Thursday morning for another Intelligent Masculinity interview. Stephen, thanks so much. And everyone in the audience, smash that heart one last time, hit the subscribe, and join us. And look forward to seeing y'all again soon. Thanks.
Thank
And
you.
let's stop being sick of this shit and let's start doing this shit. See y'all next time.